How do I get better at Call of Duty? This is a question every single Call of Duty player has had at one point in their COD journey. Whether you're a completely new player trying to learn the basics, or a seasoned veteran trying to keep up with the young guns, there's always room to improve. In this video, I'm going to focus on how new and old players to Call of Duty can get better by going through some non-monetary skills like settings, using the right weapons, and playing against better players, among other things. We're also going to cover some monetary things as well, which equipment you're using, the hardware you're playing on, because that stuff does make a difference, but it's not everything. Before we get started, if you're new here and want more Call of Duty content, hit that subscribe button. It's completely free. Let's do it. Let's start with some non-monetary things we can do to get better at Black Ops 6. A lot of these things I used myself about 16 years ago during Black Ops 1, which was my fourth Call of Duty game, but the first one I really wanted to put time into and get better. There are things we can do before we even get into a game of Call of Duty. One of the most important factors is to have the correct settings that fit your Call of Duty style. There are so many settings in Black Ops 6 now that it feels a little overwhelming. I'll go over some of the highlights that you'll definitely want to change or fine-tune. In controller settings, you're going to want to make sure that your horizontal and vertical sensitivity are set up specifically what's comfortable for you. It doesn't matter what other people are playing on. This needs to be what you're most comfortable with. These values recently changed, so I'm currently on 1.4, 1.4, which I believe translates over to 6.6 on the old values. I've played this way a majority of my life. Once I found something comfortable, I didn't want to stray away from it. I also suggest playing with controller vibration off. It will feel weird at first if you're not used to it, but believe me, it's 1,000 times better. In aiming settings, make sure you set your sensitivity multiplier to what you're most comfortable with. Personally, I play on 0.9, but I do play around with this number a little bit, moving anywhere from 0.8 to 0.95. In aiming advanced settings, make sure you have the aim response curve set to whatever plays best for you. If you're a newer player, stick to standard for now. If you're more experienced, try out different settings within linear and dynamic and find what works best. I still play on dynamic because it's what I've used the last few years, but I know a lot of people have switched to linear in Black Ops 6, so at the end of the day, there's no right answer here. Play what's comfortable for you. I'm not going to spend too much more time on the settings, as a lot of it is just personal preference and figuring out what works best for you, but I will touch on the display settings a bit. Under display quality settings, you're going to want to turn world motion blur, weapon motion blur, depth of field, and fidelity CAS off. You want to keep your vision as clear as possible, so these are all terrible settings to keep on. And the last thing I want to touch on is your field of view. I think the sweet spot is 104, but you can play around with this, and like most of these settings, find what works best for you. Aiming used to be the biggest part of Call of Duty. It's obviously still a big part. I'd say 50% aim, 50% movement now. Aim assist has also taken quite a bit away from the skill needed to have good aim, so that anyone can load in and pop a few easy kills, but you can still perfect your aim. There are a few things you can do to do this. First, you can use the firing range within Call of Duty itself to shoot dummies at 10, 25, and 50 meters away. You can even add armor plates to them to make them harder to kill. I still use this as a warm-up before a game starts, or if I'm about to use a gun I've never used before. It gives you a feel for the weapon, and it's an easy way to tell if your shot's going to be on that day, or if you're going to shoot like a burger that day. You can also check recoil patterns here using the wall plate, so you can see exactly where the weapon recoils and how you need to control it. Call of Duty doesn't have too much recoil, so most weapons are pretty easily controllable, but it's still good info to have. Next thing you can do to work on your aim is go to a private match and shoot bots. Pro COD players still do this before matches, so you know it's a great way to warm up and make sure your shot is feeling on. This is huge because confidence goes a long way in Call of Duty. While this doesn't emulate an actual game scenario perfectly, it gives you a chance to simply get kills and try to do it as efficiently as possible, all while gaining confidence in your shot. There are also third-party apps you can use to better your aim, Aim Labs being the most popular one. While this isn't completely necessary for Call of Duty since aim assist is so high, Aim Labs can help better your natural aim, which will eventually translate over to your real game, and it'll come natural to you with enough practice. Lastly, this one's going to seem like a no-brainer, but simply play the game. When I first started playing Call of Duty, my aim was terrible. but I've now been playing for 18 years, and it's all just second nature. It's like anything in life. If you do it enough, you're gonna improve and eventually master it. This one was a big one for me when I was growing up playing COD, and it's something I didn't do for a long time, but simply watching better players play and playing against better players. You can learn a lot about how to play Call of Duty by simply watching better players on YouTube or Twitch play the game and watching how they play. You can take that info and push it into your own game map after map. Whether it's how they approach a gunfight by sliding into a head glitch, taking a route you didn't know existed, shooting from an angle you didn't know you could shoot from, you can learn all these things by simply watching experienced players play the game. I know for me, growing up watching guys like T Martin and Ali A play COD made a huge difference in my game. The next part of this is playing against better players. This is kind of hard to do now because of skill-based matchmaking, and you're always going to be playing against people within your skill level, but if you have a friend who's better than you, go party up with them and play in their lobbies. You might get frustrated and feel like you aren't improving at all, but if you pair everything I've already listed with consistently playing against better players that are better than you will eventually improve. It's how all of us old heads improved. You go from getting pooped on to the one doing the pooping, and nothing feels better. You can also play ranked play to ensure you're actually improving. If one season you can only get to silver, and the next you make it to gold, that's visible proof that you're improving, and playing against those better players in ranked is naturally going to make you a better player as well. Moving on, you have to master the current game's mechanics to better your skill gap. Whether it's a jetpack game and movement is super key, or it's an old school boots on the ground with slow movement where positioning and map knowledge are everything. You have to master that game's main mechanic. For Black Ops 6, that mechanic is Omni movement. You don't have to utilize this fully to play well, but if you do, it makes certain things possible that you wouldn't have been able to do before. The main thing that's going to improve your mechanics in Black Ops 6 is the slide function. If you aren't sliding or slide canceling, this game becomes a lot harder. There are so many engagements you can slide into, whether it's around a corner or directly at an enemy. It's gonna throw the guy off. Unless they have great reaction time and great aim, they aren't going to kill you. One thing Shotzi recently said on stream, he's a pro COD player for Optic Texas for those of you who don't know, he says not just to slide around the map, but to aim slide all the time to get into that habit of expecting someone to be there after a slide. This will help you get the jump on the enemy, and in Call of Duty, every millisecond counts. Once you master the slide, then you can start messing around with the dive. I don't find the dive all that useful in Black Ops 6, but it's a super fun mechanic and looks really cool when it works out. So whatever COD game you're playing, you have to cater to and master that game's mechanic if you want to improve. Awareness. Awareness is something I feel that's been lacking in the new era of Call of Duty. When I was growing up, learning to use the minimap was everything. Now, I'm seeing people on Twitter saying they don't even look at their minimap. I'm sorry, what? One of the best pieces of advice you can give to new COD players is to utilize the minimap, and utilize it before Infinity Ward tries to take it away again. Another part of awareness is map knowledge. Knowing the ins and outs of a map is one of the most important aspects of Call of Duty. Knowing hardpoint rotations, spawn locations, when spawns are going to flip, heavily camped areas, choke points on the map, these are all things that can help you pick up some easy kills on the map and can help your team win the game in the end with some good comms as well. This goes back to watching other players play the game. Watch how they play the game to understand why they're making the decisions they make on the map. One of the biggest tips I can give, and anybody can give, is to simply use the meta. Use the best guns in the game. At least in Black Ops 6, there's enough weapons that are really good so that it won't get old using a meta. The XM4 and Krig are great choices for assault rifles. The Jackal, SOG, and KSV are great choices for SMGs. Find a loadout that fits your playstyle. There are a bunch of loadout videos on the internet right now. Use the meta until your game improves enough to a point that you're comfortable experimenting with non-meta guns and starting the Dark Matter camo grind while you're at it. Let's move on to some monetary things you can do to improve your Call of Duty game. Everything I've mentioned thus far is much more important than the stuff that I'm about to mention, which is the equipment you can buy to improve your Call of Duty game. Starting with a monitor. Let's ditch the 70-inch TVs, people. I know there are a lot of people that still play on TVs. I've seen it firsthand, and it's not pretty. Does the game look good on them? Sure, but it looks even better on a monitor, and there's no input lag. That's the biggest reason to play on a monitor, to decrease that input lag from when you press a button on your controller to when it actually happens on the screen. You don't just want to get any monitor, you want to get one with a high refresh rate, low response time, good display size, and quality resolution. These are the most important factors when buying a gaming monitor. Ideally, you want to have a 244Hz refresh rate, 1 millisecond response time, a 21-inch to 27-inch display, that's personal preference, and whatever display quality you prefer. You can get some great monitors at a cheap price from brands like Samsung, Acer, and BenQ. Do your research and make sure you're happy with your purchase. Once you make this switch, you will immediately notice a difference in your gameplay. The next thing you should invest in is a good headset. This goes a long way in improving your COD game. Being able to hear enemy footsteps and pinpointing where they are is like having a permanent UAV. There are actually a lot of cheaper options available for this now. Me, personally, I still use the Astro A10s, which were relatively cheap at $79 Canadian. And I've been using them for 7 years and they still hold up great. Most brands like Turtle Beach, Razer, Logitech offer cheaper options under $100, and they all have higher quality options which are closer to around $350. But they offer much more customization options for your audio. Whatever headset you decide, make sure you do your research. Obviously, the more you spend, the better the headset, but there are cheap options out there that get the job done. Once you have a headset, you're gonna want a good controller, preferably one with back paddles unless you can play claw, which I don't suggest, and your hands will thank you later in life. There are a few good companies out there that make great controllers, Scuff being the most popular, Battle Beaver, and Xbox Elite controllers. I really like the Xbox Elite controller, it's my personal favorite. It comes with a bunch of different thumbstick options and button mapping, but obviously this is all dependent on what you play Call of Duty on. If you're on PC, a Scuff PS5 controller with overclock is your best option. The last thing I'm going to mention here is a personal favorite of mine and something I've been using for 8 years now, a Kontrol Freek thumbstick extender for my right analog stick. Once I started using this, my game improved like crazy. Obviously, they aren't as important anymore as aim assist is super strong and does a lot of the work for you, but I still use it and I still love it. I love the rubber texture of the thumbstick, my fingers never slip and always keeps my aim on point. I will probably use this for the rest of my life as long as I'm on a controller. That's gonna do it for the video, guys. Like I said, the most important part in improving your Call of Duty game is to simply play the game. If you put in the time, if you put in the work, you're gonna get better and it's gonna feel oh so good. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're still here, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already so I can see you in the next video. We'll chat then.